What's up, everybody? Thank you all for tuning in to my 48th episode of Project Renaissance Man. Tonight I'm going to be talking about higher levels of consciousness, and I'm going to give you guys a few pointers, as I traditionally do, on how to develop this mindset. These pointers will assist you in developing the mindset of having higher levels of consciousness. Before I start off with the pointers, I want to start by saying that when we look at consciousness, I just try to imagine a world with extremely high levels of consciousness all across the world. Like, imagine if every single individual in the world had higher levels of consciousness. How beautiful would that be? Because check this out. From higher levels of consciousness, there are things that branch off from them, from the higher levels of consciousness. What branches off from it are extremely great qualities, if not virtues, in their own right. Care. People become more caring when their levels of consciousness are higher. When their levels of consciousness are higher, they become more compassionate. They become more considerate. So they're the 3 C's I like to list, among many things. That just comes with the territory of having a higher level of consciousness, because having a higher level basically is us becoming more aware and enlightened and knowing more about the effects that we have, that our actions have, and being more considerate about what we do and how we make decisions. And it's not so much overthinking as it is analyzing and assessing how we're going to proceed with an action, and being much wiser with how we conduct ourselves, which is a great thing. We keep ourselves in check. It's not putting shackles about ourselves. It's just a form of self-discipline. It's making sure that we're not getting out of line. We're kind of keeping ourselves in check instead of, counting on somebody else to keep us in check, and this is a good thing. So it's a great strength to have. And along with that, I want to share another thing with you guys with regard to higher levels of consciousness. And this has to do with something I read in a book once. I can't remember who the book was written by or what the title of the book was, but I can remember there were a lot of things in there that were like music to my ears, like just things that really made sense and got me thinking and seeing things from a different perspective. And this one thing inside the book that really caught my attention was this reference to spirituality versus religion. It said something along the lines, and this isn't verbatim, but it said something like, religion has to do with what you believe in. Spirituality has to do with your level of consciousness. And I love that. And that's why I gravitate more towards a spiritual way of seeing the world versus a religious one, because I feel like a lot of religions, aside from Hinduism, which is probably the most tolerant world religion that I've ever learned about, a lot of religions have their own parameters. They have their own boxes, and things that are outside those boxes are excluded, and they are intolerant of a lot of things that I think are it's a little crazy for them to be so intolerant of certain aspects of other religions. But I guess if it compromises, the ideology, the core ideology of the religion, then I guess it being a threat alone makes it fair game for being dismissed. But nonetheless, that's why I like spirituality so much, and it really appeals to me because it has more to do with consciousness. And imagine if that's what was focused on, more than, these teachings and these parables. Like, they're beautiful, and they mean a lot, but I just love the idea of spirituality and just trying to elevate our levels of consciousness. That's just such a beautiful thing. Like, you can't go wrong with that if we all elevated our levels of consciousness. So now I'm going to move on to the pointers. The very first one, and these pointers have to do with how you can further develop your levels of consciousness. The very first one has to do with, and this is more of a primer, it's like the training wheels. Reading worldly articles. And the reason I say this is very, assists in developing a higher level of consciousness is because when you read worldly articles, you become more aware of what's going on in the world. Not just what's going on down the street from your house, not just what's going on a few states over, but what's going on in countries in Africa, what's going on in countries in the Middle East, and all throughout the world, South America. What's going on? A lot of us have not a clue, aside from what we're hearing off of Fox or NBC. You know how limited those sources of media are, like news outlets? Extremely limited. They're really not giving you much of a picture at all. It's like a little dot on the canvas of a painting of what's really all going on in the world. Like much more pivotal events and significant changes and stuff across the globe that we don't even hear of because we don't really open ourselves up to reading about these things. So I recommend reading worldly articles. So I like to read UTNE, which is a very progressive magazine. I used to love reading Newsweek. What's the other one? Oh my goodness. It's a very popular one. I can't remember. If it comes to me before the end of the vlog, I'll let you know what it is. But I read a few magazines, and it's journalism. And so you get to see things that you would otherwise not have access to if you just tune into your Fox or your NBC. There are so many advancements going on in the world today that if you don't read articles and research online, you're not going to find these things. So that's why it's so important to do this. But yeah, nonetheless, getting back to the point, read worldly articles, you become more aware of the world. And you have more of a worldview as opposed to just a city view or a town view or a state view. The second pointer I have is to philosophize. Go out with people and talk about the deep subjects, taboos. And there's no line that can't be crossed when it comes to philosophy. Just open your mind. You can't restrain that. It's free thinking and just let it go wherever. And I love philosophizing. I philosophize with my brothers, my mom, my sister. I philosophize with my really good friend Ben, my good friend Brandon. I philosophize with a lot of really cool, thought-provoking type people, that get my mind flowing. And then we kind of bounce off each other with ideas and thoughts and all this awesome stuff. And I had a conversation recently with a really cool friend. We talked about the Neuralink, and we just really started going crazy with this. Like, what if, and what, all these what ifs and stuff. It made it really interesting. Real quick, I'll fill you guys in. So the Neuralink, I don't know too much about it. I know there was an article on it, and the general idea is that there's this chip, which I don't agree with it, and I'd never do this, but it's the idea that this chip could be implanted into your brain, and then through the implantation of this chip, what you can do is you can access this chip because it's in your brain, and you can tap into a cloud. And through tapping into this cloud, you have access to all the information you could ever want to get your hands on. There are many things I think are wrong with this, aside from the whole ethical thing. I think there are a lot of things that are wrong with it, but I'm not going to talk about that right now because this vlog's about something else. But what I'm getting at is just this subject alone had us really thinking of things and speculating. And this is all good for the mind. It's training the mind. It's getting the mind working. And you want to stay sharp and you want to stay open. And you want your mind to be as wide and deep and fathomless as space. And this is one of the best ways to do that, is to philosophize. And through philosophizing, keeping your mind open, you're allowing for a higher level of consciousness, because you're training your mind to not be trapped within small boxes of whatever you were taught growing up or whatever you were influenced by from small systems throughout your life. And the third pointer I have for you guys to develop a higher level of consciousness is to practice introspection regularly. So just dig into yourself and come to terms with things that you really don't believe. You know, there are a lot of things we may do, but it doesn't come from somewhere deep and authentic inside of us. It's maybe done for some other reason, and we may not have any knowledge as to why we're doing these things. But that's why it's so important for us to dig into ourselves and ask ourselves, what do we truly believe? And to accept those things and be like, okay, a lot of people are going to hate me for this, or they're going to disagree with me on this, but this is really what I believe, and I need to start expressing that. I can no longer afford to keep this bottled up inside of me, because this is really what I believe. And through introspection, you start to find out more about yourself, and you start to evaluate things and analyze yourself. It's self-analysis. And also, you know, you can kind of push away your biases, which is very important. And, you know, this is a great practice for the mind, is introspection, finding out who you are, trying to find out who you are and what you really want to be. And, you know, it's so much can unfold from this process. But yeah, and through introspection, it allows you to focus on areas that you need to improve upon, you know, which in turn, you practicing this is working on developing your consciousness, your level of consciousness, because you're trying to figure out ways that you can improve upon yourself. And if you improve upon yourself, you're going to be a better individual to the world. You're going to be better to the world, because you're making yourself better. So that is all I have for you guys tonight. Thank you all for tuning in to my 48th episode of Project Renaissance Man. And a real quick shout out to Ben. Thank you so much, bro. You know how deep our connection is that we share together, and we just click so well. And we could talk about anything, man. You are one of the coolest people I've ever met, and I love your feedback, and I appreciate you always, you know, putting posts up and just being so supportive with this whole vlog series. You're amazing, dude. You understand it completely, and I love you for that, among other things. But I hope you all are doing great. Yeah, I just wanted to give you that acknowledgement. I want to do more of these acknowledgements, because I have so many great people in my life that deserve to know how much they mean. So thank you all for tuning in. If you guys feel you have benefited from this video and you have enjoyed watching it, please be sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, give me a like, and I will see you all on Wednesday. Later.